Hi, I'm Dawn Marie Solis with Neuro Awesome Life, and I have the extraordinary privilege to be talking to Dr. Kimberly Douglass today. We have been getting to know each other for the last nearly 2 years now.
Yes.
And I, I love Dr. Douglass more and more all the time. The uh, intelligence and grace and strength and creativity that's constantly expressed. And we've been thinking about some new projects, and something that came up was design thinking. And I got really excited about that because even though I've never used that term to describe myself, uh, uh, from listening to Dr. Douglas, I think I include myself as a design thinker. Uh,
Mhm.
but like many neurodivergent people, we have lots of ideas and not necessarily a sense of how to enact them. And so would you please share a little bit, whatever you want to share more about your background, and then just like take it away, what you're thinking, um, yeah, just what you're thinking.
Okay. Thank you for hosting me in this conversation. I always appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with you, whether it is in a recorded session or informally in a meeting. I always walk away a little bit wiser. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You just made my day, my week. That means so much to me. Thank you. Yes, I'm gonna write that down.
Oh,
Dr. Douglas.
yes. Okay. So
Next thing.
we're gonna take that energy and keep working with that. So I'm Dr. Kimberly Douglass, and I'm just going to give you the highlights about me that I think are important to this conversation. I'm a former academic, but once an academic, always an academic. Somebody sent me an invitation to review for a journal just last week. So I come to this conversation from that perspective. And my tenure was in information science. I'm a systems thinker. I'm a pattern reader. I'm a neurodivergent person. I identify as ADHD and autistic and a parent of a neurodivergent child. I am also a person who has lots of ideas. And one of the things that was really helpful to me in my academic career was as a person who loves theory, it's really helpful for me to have a framework. So you mentioned earlier as neurodivergence, we often have lots of ideas. And what we're talking about today is design thinking. And design thinking, that process, which I'll describe in just a moment, has been really helpful in giving me a framework, a place to put all the different ideas I have and just think about them in a systematic way. But before we talk about design thinking, I want to pan out just a little bit. And I want to say I want to acknowledge that we are in a pivotal time in history where we as individuals and as small communities can make differences in ways that we probably could not imagine even this time last week. The thing that you've been thinking about doing, the thing that you've been thinking about working on, now is the time to get the support you need to push that further. And it doesn't mean you have to do the whole thing. Figure out which parts you have the capabilities and the capacity to do and move that forward in seeking the support and the community you need. So this is an opportunity to be transformational. Like we can fundamentally change some things, but also transformative where we have deep and profound change. And we can do it through processes like design thinking. Desiree Stevens, a person I collaborate with often, posted a video on TikTok where she was talking about all the small things we can do. For example, coming up with a bank where you hold the bank that holds maxi pads and tampons and feminine hygiene products. I'm thinking of project feminine hygiene products so that people can get the products they need without having to go stand in a line somewhere to get them or go ask for money to get them. Like you go to this place. So think about that. This week, I'm meeting with someone who is a graphic designer And what she's doing in her design thinking process, she's looking at forms that we fill out at the doctor's office and other places, and how we can improve those forms to improve the experience that people have when they go to the doctor's office or when they go seek the support of a counselor. The way you have to fill out forms should not be another barrier to your getting the kind of service that you need. And the example that, and other examples that Desiree gave, and then the examples from this person who's doing this forms development, both of those are examples of design thinking. And design thinking is usually a 5-step process, and it's not a linear process. It flows in and out. I have a more extensive process, but I'll give you the 5 basics. Number 1 is defining a problem. Number 2 is empathizing with the user. So the user in the example with the forms is the person who's filling out the forms at the doctor's office, but it's also the person who's receiving the form to enter that data. So there are multiple users. Some users are considered more important in the process than others, but there can be multiple users. So looking at the needs of the user. So define, empathize with the needs of the users, ideate. So you come up with an idea that would solve this problem as the users have defined it. Then you prototype it. So then coming up with a form that might work. And then once you come up with a form that might work, then you test it out. Or coming up with a bank for the tampons and the maxi pads, the other feminine hygiene products. I can't get the word project out of my mouth. Products, and prototyping that and see if that actually works for the people on the ground. And here's the thing about design thinking. It keeps us honest. It keeps it real. If you want to know who a system has been built for, look at the results that it keeps getting. Look at the results. We're not talking about, how you feel and, oh, I intended to do. No, who's getting the results in the system? I always get his name. His last name is Deming, and he has a quote that says that a system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. And design thinking provides it's a framework that really showcases that. So if I am constantly getting a system that leads to expulsions from school or suspensions from school, that means that it is not designed for the people who are getting suspended or expelled. It is designed for someone else. And maybe it's designed for the prison industrial complex, or maybe it is designed for politicians, but it is not designed for that child who is getting suspended from school and not getting their needs met. So that empathize part, empathizing with the needs of the users, that is about taking time to listen to them and really take in what they say they need. And it could be that you're creating something. And when I say create, this could be a process. It could be a product. It could be a service. It could be a way of doing things. And if you're designing something and you haven't taken time to listen to the people who you say are the intended users or the most important users, then perhaps you're not really designing for them. Perhaps you're designing for yourself. And if that is the case, then that is the case. Like, we don't need to get into this thing about, well, I'm being an ally, I'm doing, no. Did you listen to the person you said is the user? And did you design a system based upon their needs as they have identified?
That's such an integral piece to starting a business, to developing a project, to uh, hosting a family dinner, right? Like whatever
Yes.
we have to put together, first being real about our intent.
Yes.
I may want to be a person that is, like you said, in full ally mode, like really, really invested and in there. One of the most profound things that I've learned on my journey as an ally, um, an amazing North American Indigenous person took the time to share with me that I had to get very, very honest with myself. How much am I there for her and people like her? And how much am I there because it's important to me to feel like a good person?
Mm.
And she wasn't trying to blame or shame me.
Right.
She was giving of herself to help me on my journey. She did not have to do to get me to think deeply about those realities. And I think when we can be super honest, then we start creating and producing the best stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If I can say, as much as my heart is out there for whomever in the world, and I'd like to feel like a good person, right? Then I can be real about it.
Yes, just be honest about it.
Just be
And
real.
and and part of listening to people with regard to the conversation about allyship is also understanding that you're an ally if we say you're an ally. Like
Right.
it's not a self-proclaimed thing. So the thing is about design thinking is that we're always doing it. We're always doing. That's the thing. Like I'm talking about it like it's something new. And I'm talking about it in a sense of now we're talking about community building, but it's part of what we do every single day because we perceive things in our environment every single day, problems that need to be solved every single day. And so, yes, it's about community, but it's also your bedtime routine or your morning routine. An example that I give often is about when my son was 6 or 7, and the morning routines were rough. I mean, rough. And I thought I was hitting on all cylinders and doing all the right things, but I was not considering the main user, which was my son. I was considering what time we had to get to school. I was considering what I had to do for the day and how I was trying to get everything done before we dropped him off so that I could then leave. And he wasn't the main user. I was the main user of that system. And so one of the things I had to reckon with is that, and I had the flexibility to do this, is it was about getting him to school, coming back home and resetting if my husband wasn't dropping him off, coming back, resetting, then going to work. I had the opportunity, the option to do that. But even beyond that main decision was looking at his sensory experience in the mornings. What were we introducing? How much were we introducing? How fast were we introducing it? We literally installed a new system where we walked him from station to station. So from the bed to the bathroom, from the bathroom to the kitchen table. And instead of turning on an overhead light right away, just a night light in the bedroom, a night light in the bathroom, a lamp in the bathroom, never turning on any overhead lights until he was just about ready to walk out the front door. We used to listen to NPR and we turned that off because we needed for the user of that system to arrive at school ready, more ready than he had been. There was no perfect solution to it, but we needed for him to arrive in a state where he could hear what was being said to him. He could interact with his peers a certain way. He didn't need to arrive in a state where he's frazzled once he gets there. So we also got up earlier. We took more time. We gave each activity more time. And this was design thinking. We're always doing this, even when we don't call it that. And so, what I want to bring people in is to formalize that process, identify what the problem is, and who are you really trying to serve as you identify this problem and come and ideate solutions. Really thinking about that and just being honest about it.
I love that you used that example. I'm working with members of the neurodivergent community every day, and I'm hearing statistics like 70% under and unemployed for the neurodivergent community. Uh, I can't work for other people. I'm trying to work for myself. but I can't even solution self-care or a filing system, right? Right. How am I supposed to go into business if I can't figure out how to, you know, wash dishes, shower, and brush my teeth? And so I love that your first major example was family oriented. So if we can stay with that example, if that's all right.
Sure, absolutely.
It's inspiring to hear that you came up with the system. But if I'm not used to finding system solutions, I may not know where to even start, right?
Mhm.
Like from what you said, I get the idea, okay, I need to make sure I know I'm actually trying to solution for the right person.
Mhm.
And as a parent of neurodivergent children, even though I didn't know it when they were growing up, they're all adults now. We all know it now. I didn't know it then, but I felt in a battle between recognizing they had specific needs and my needs didn't align. And how much of my needs as the mom do I just try to swallow and move aside and all that? So I think, especially for the neurodivergent folks out there, if executive functioning, if there are any other levels of challenge, the idea of creating a system that will work may break brains, right? So
Right.
can you take us through, if you can remember, your brain is designed for this, right? You are a systems thinker. You're designed for this. For those of us who aren't, it's like step one. Like, how do I analyze my child's routine and see the tweaks and understand my own role? And I think I'm saying more words than are necessary.
Okay, so let me be really careful here because one of the things I know how I present to people, and I know that I present as together, right? I got on my funeral clothes with my pearls. I even had on the jacket that I took off earlier, right?
That's because I showed up in my gym clothes, and I thank you for dressing down
No
to
problem.
match.
We solved it. We came together. We found a place in the middle.
I was late today. Full
No,
disclosure.
you're good. We found a place in the middle. But also, that is also part of traumatic experiences I've had. Is appearing like I don't need anything, like I got all my shit together, and I don't. When I talk about, and what I want to be careful about is when I go back and I recount these experiences, they sound very linear. I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. What I didn't tell you was about the times that I was sliding down the wall crying. And like a day, I literally sat in the closet and cried. So, in my telling of this and reconstructing the story, it's just like, nice little smooth little
Right.
story. But I didn't think of myself as a systems thinker back then, and I didn't automatically get there. I would pour over academic paper after academic paper after academic paper after academic paper, trying to understand because I had access and I had the framework, trying to understand what can we do here. I also didn't like the way my son was being treated at school. And I didn't want to replicate the way they were treating him at school at home. And I saw myself doing that. And I saw myself being heavy handed. And so when we talk about design thinking, so one of the things that I will talk about if people, come in, want to work with me and talking about design thinking, one of the things that we have to make clear is what our assumptions are. And one of the assumptions is whose needs are most important in this situation, or whose needs will be prioritized in this situation. So that's one of the assumptions you have to be really clear about. The other thing is there are some other assumptions. I had to move. Like I had to decide, and this was very painful. I had to decide if the underlying goal was to make him do what I needed for him to do, or was the underlying goal connection? And I had to make a decision that no matter what his grades were, no matter whatever else happened, or how fast he responded to me, or how quickly he was obedient to me, I had to decide that the underlying goal was connection. And the thing about design thinking is you have to make your assumptions clear. And so I could not have designed a system like that if the assumption was that I just need for him to snap in line. I need obedience from him. It had been the assumption because I thought that I could control certain things. But where to start? To answer your question of where to start with. So one of the things is that we have been taught that we just need to do something. If something is happening, we just need to do something. I don't think that that's the starting place. The starting place is I need to acknowledge that something is happening that is not working for us and is not working for our child. Another one of the assumptions is that this isn't just him, this is our family. So it's the connection that this is a family situation, that it has to work for the whole family. So, but I had to give up the control part of it. And once I was able to give up that, I could do something very important, which is acknowledge that there's a problem here that I don't have the skills for right now. And I think that's critical. With design thinking, you actually do have design thinking skills, but the way I want to bring people in is to make it more intentional. This is skills development. You can use it in your career, you can use it at school, but you can also use it in your household. So I recognize that I lack the skills to have a peaceful morning at home. And once I recognize that, oh, okay, I could give myself a break. The second thing I had to do was then get curious about what was happening. So I had to observe without judgment and just think about what was happening. And even before I thought about why it was happening, what is happening when he first wakes up? What is happening when he goes into the bathroom? What is happening when he sits down to eat? What is happening? What role are we playing in this? Right? Because it's easy to just say, well, you know what? He's got a bad attitude. He needs to da 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 da. No, my assumption is that he always wants connection. My assumption is that he wants connection. Is what we're doing in the morning contributing to that connection or not? And that was a jagged pill because it was not. And it was based on our needs, but actually our superficial needs. Because our deeper needs were also served when we improved the system for him, it improved it for us as well. So back to your question, where to start? Where to start is to acknowledge what it is. Then get curious about it. Make some observations. Just look at what's happening. Look at it without judgment. Then you can start to look at it and say, okay, wait a minute. Is there something different that I can do here? And also be willing to experiment. That's the thing in a society like ours where we think there's black and white answers to everything and one best way to do things. No, not with design thinking is an iterative process. It is you're constantly moving and shaping and testing and retesting and integrating. It's not a one and done. We still had to make, and again, just being careful not to make it sound like a linear process. We still had to test it out. Some things worked at first and some things did not. But on the whole, how well they worked or didn't work, just allowing us to be in that space where we acknowledge problem, we got curious about it, we accepted what was being offered to us in the way of data, that just those steps alone were not only transformational, but they were transformative to our family and to us as individuals as well.
So I'm thinking about, well, many, many things. Um, a little bit earlier, you were saying there were 5 pieces to design thinking. And so you gave us a little bit of a hint of at least how to get started. So what would be those pieces? Again, using this example, because we can use this example, and yes, we're talking about your child in the morning and getting to school and getting your needs met and all that, but the the basics apply to, I need to start a business, I need to create a process at work, I need, right, we can take this, we're using this as an example, but it is transportable into any
It
other
is.
situation where you need to come up with a design for something, with a system for something. Right. So,
So, and thank you for this question. It gives me opportunity to clarify and just make it explicit. When we talk about design thinking, this comes from the design engineer world. But in the, I guess, early 2000s, some of the leaders in that world started to say, it's not enough for you to sit at your desk and innovate or innovate in isolation. So it took this conversation about design thinking, they started to think about the process more than the person or the position.
mm-hmm.
So what this does is this moves it from this is owned by these people who do these things to this is a process that all of us can use. And so your question helps me get to the point that if you are trying to develop a curriculum, if you are conducting research, if you are building a product, a process, a service, this can transfer to those goals. This can absolutely transfer to those. And so going back to those 5 steps, and again, my process, I've added some things to this, but this is the basic, the foundational framework. Defining a problem, empathizing with the user who has the problem, empathizing with their needs, ideating a solution. So having an idea in your head about what the solution should be, then prototyping the solution, coming up with the model Rubik's Cube, and then testing it to see how it works with those users. So you can do this inside your family, or you can do it with forms in the office or and just trying to think of some other examples. Let me build out the example with the forms because I'm so happy to meet this person this week because I've been talking about the forms thing for a while. I am a bureaucrat, so got the uniform and everything, right? So I know how to be a bureaucrat. I understand processes. I understand hierarchy, tech order, all those things. I also understand how bureaucratic power is packs a lot of punch. So whether you're able to apply for something or you're able to get an explanation from someone who works in the office about what's happening with your benefits, bureaucrats are in a lot of ways gatekeepers. And I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. But the processes you create as a bureaucrat or the ones you carry out says a lot about who has power in that system. So if people are coming in contact with forms that are confusing to them or have too many questions on them, or they're in a format that people can't access them, then you are distributing power. So if you think about that from a design thinking standpoint, define a problem. So if you are distributing forms in your office where people don't have questions to help them explain what is happening with them, if it's a doctor's office, for example, then that interferes with the treatment, assessment, and treatment of that individual. So if it's only asking you certain, like some people, like, you and I would probably, if they gave us an open-ended, a blank line or whatever, we could think of things that we would write. But some people need prompts. Some people need language. And so how you set up those forms determine what the doctor knows about that person. So what they assess about the person and then how they treat the person. So the forms, the thing that's on a piece of paper, has a direct impact with the kind of treatment that you could receive for 10 years. And so, thinking about it from a design thinking standpoint, if you do not perceive that there's a problem, then there's no need to empathize with the user's needs. So, who the most important user is in that situation is the doctor's office to keep rolling on the way that they're rolling on, to maintain the status quo. The design is set up to benefit them. So, if you think about the whole world that is around us, this world lived in somebody's imagination. The house across the street, the way the streets, the way that there are curb cuts to give people access. But you can see that it was an afterthought on my street. You can see that. The way we take, instead of growing crops in our front yard, we now have lawns to sell lawnmower. So it was a design. It was imagined. It lived in somebody's imagine. And so there was a design process that prioritized certain users' needs over others. And this is what we have. This is the result that we have. And so you get the same result if you are thinking about what happens in the doctor's office that way, right? Somebody imagine that form. Usually what happens with forms is people just keep replicating them from like 2004 or whatever. But that doesn't serve the needs of that person sitting there filling it out. It serves the needs of the doctor's office, and they don't have to change.
I just had that experience today. I was late coming home because I was getting assessed in speech therapy because of a traumatic brain injury. And they're taking me through all of these different questions. And as a knowledgeable neurodivergent person, I know when you ask me, autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dyscalculic, dyspraxic person, how much trouble I have finding things that I have set down. I'm not going to answer you the same way as somebody who doesn't have an autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, etc. brain, right? Forget the traumatic brain injury. I struggle with object permanence and constancy. So she asks me this question, and my autism immediately kicks into gear because I know there are 14 different answers for that question, depending on what kind of brain you have.
Right.
And you're not going to get an answer that's going to inform you about my brain injury.
Right.
Unless I tailor my answer, right? And then I struggle. Does tailoring mean I'm not being fully honest, right? Like all of my natural autistic justice, honesty, forthrightness, right? All of that stuff gets complicated in there. And I'm just like, right? And the more of those questions that I feel like I need to explain, that is not a question that's going to give you accurate information.
No.
Because
No.
of my brain, the more my energy kind of cranks up. And I started to realize, thank God, I had enough brain space to pay attention. The person on the other side of the table is starting to feel maybe attacked. And I recognize I've forgotten to regulate my face, pleasant facial expression, my loudness has increased, my intent has increased, and it's not her, it's the form. I'm mad at the freaking form because more than half of those questions are not going to give accurate and usable information because we are not asking the brain that's in front of them.
Right.
They're not asking the autistic ADHD brain. They're asking the non-autistic ADHD, non-dyslexic, not right. They're asking a person that I will never be.
Right. And it just goes to show that the system, what it is doing, even in that moment, is creating a situation in which you cannot get your needs met. Because see, now you have to do labor. So you're trying to bring yourself into balance and in resonance, and you know, look a certain way, present, and some people turn red when they're having this, like you can't hide it. So it creates a whole thing you now have to do, a performance you have to do, which means that it is actively interfering with the quality of care that you're receiving.
Right.
Because even if you got the best care, your perception is now that I have to do all these things. And that is a perfect example in which I really hate to hear that. But it is a perfect example of how basic things within a system design, the basics turns into certain kinds of results for people.
Right. Right. So applying this to, let's pull this back and apply it to, let's say I knit and crochet.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start an Etsy business, right? Obviously, I need to know some things that aren't as obvious part of the design thinking, although if we talked long enough,
Mm-hmm.
they are, right? Like I might need to know some businessy things and stuff like that. But if I'm just like, I'm really good at knitting and crocheting, and my hats and scarves and mittens and sweaters are the bomb, and people say I should try to sell them. Well, it's a
So,
design thinking process, right? Like people in cold weather need hats. I don't feel like I need to talk to people about whether or not they need hats. Except I know as a lifelong business person, oh my, yes, you do. Or
oh
you're going to
yes, you
make
do.
hats nobody buys,
That's
right?
right. And so there's a distinction I want to make here that I had to learn the hard way.
Mm.
That the reason why design thinking is so valuable in empathizing with the needs of the user is so valuable, especially if you're a pattern reader and you think you want to do something, you want to create something, you want to design something. What we're really good at doing is identifying things that people need. But people don't purchase things they need, they purchase things they want.
Often, yes.
Right. And so hopefully people want to know about design thinking. And people want to know how they can use it in teaching and research and product development and take it to undergraduate and graduate and career. So we want
Let's
people
get
to
our kid
want.
out the door. That's the process I
That's
need.
right.
I hear
So
that
making sure that people want what we're talking about here.
process.
So we're really good at pattern readers at being able to stand back and look at the wants. I mean the needs that people have, but that doesn't mean that they want it. So what design thinking offers is that I can start with a problem. I can articulate a problem, and I can go to the people that I think will want this. I have articulated a problem. Is it a problem for them? Because they may not even perceive that it's a problem for them, or they may already have it, or whatever. And so by talking to them, one of the most effective ways that I found is talking with people one to one. Like you can use market data and things like that, but if you're small, go talk to 10 people. Talk to 10 people in that particular area of geographical area and see if it's something that they perceive that they even need. And let and here's the thing about talking to them one to one is number one, they're going to give you language for how to talk to other people. That's number one. And number two, what they're going to do, you may start out with them telling you, no, we don't need this. But as you go into conversation, if you just let people talk, well, wait a minute, I do actually need it, and here's why. And so talking to people and letting them express what their needs and their wants are is a very important part of the process. And I'm a researcher by nature, by practice, and I forgot to do this at first. Like I didn't think about, I was listening to things that I saw on social media. Social media can be a great source of data, but it's also a very noisy space. So you have to decide, again, having a framework, the design thinking framework. You have to decide what the value is of the data that you're being presented And so, but talking to people one to one has been one of the most effective ways for me to discern whether or not it's something that people actually want. And many times, what happens is after I talk to two or three people, I then redefine what the problem is, then come up with, then ideate, then prototype, then test it out.
So I did a vendor event a few months back, and the cost of getting into this event for the general public was to bring uh, any number of feminine supplies. You could bring a tampon and they'd let you in the door, right? Because we were collecting to benefit women in need in the area. And I loved that idea. I really loved that idea. Um, it didn't fully resonate as an entry fee.
Hmm.
And we weren't going to turn people away at the door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The vendors had paid good money to be there, right? What we really needed was more people in the door. We were trying to do a good thing, so we used the entry fee,
Right, right.
right, to
Gotcha.
do the good thing. And other people have done this with, like, bring a can of soup, bring a non-perishable food item, bring an old coat, right? People have done events like this where they use the entry fee, quote unquote, as a charitable donation. And I sat there all day thinking about, yay, we collected, but it didn't fully work.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was something we were missing.
Okay.
Up with that idea, right? Our design had some flaws. So if I'm going to come to you with this, I really want the work I do to have uh, personal financial benefit and societal change and philanthropic benefit, right? I want to do these things. I have personally bumped into over and over and over again the things I think are brilliant.
Sure. Yeah.
Of course, everybody who has a heart and a brain is going to want to do this thing. And at some point in my process, I start bumping into, yeah, except they don't. They don't even understand it. They want a different type of access, right? Like, I bump into so much that I had no idea was going to be in my way. I don't know that I could have talked to enough people to figure out all of that stuff. Sometimes that testing piece you're talking about is the only way you're going to find out if something,
Right. Yes.
because for one thing, what somebody imagines they might like when you describe it may be very different once you hand it to them.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but how do I go back and look at that vendor event and think, how do I find what went wrong? I guess that's the question I'm trying to ask. How do I
Okay.
find what went wrong? I tested a theory. It worked to a certain extent. Maybe that's good enough for me, but it didn't work. And if I want to improve it, now what do I do if I'm a design thinker?
I'm so glad you provided me with this example because it gives me the opportunity to say something that I probably need to say in other spaces where I'm talking about design thinking. Part what separates me from other people who talk about design thinking is they tend to talk about it from the beginning forward. I also talk about it post mortem,
After
right? So we go, I know it sounds bad, but after everything has dried up and and it's like we're just call it what time call it what can and actually there's a phrase for this, and I think it's like a postmortem audit. There's actually a word, and I have to go back and look it up, but to do like a forensic
Yeah,
audit,
right. You're going to look at something for why it happened.
right?
Why did it go?
Um, so I'm going to write down the phrase forensic design and see if I can make that stick somewhere, but we'll see. But it gives me the opportunity to clarify where I'm coming from. And it is where I started in the beginning of the conversation, which is that look at the results you are getting. The results you can, I know that this was a one-time event for you, but in general, if you look at the results that you keep getting, it tells you a lot about who this is actually for. And so one of the first questions I would, if I were working with you and I wanted to do like a forensic approach to this, one of the first things I would do is I would ask you, who did you think this was for? And it could be multiple users. And it sounds like for one group of users, it actually did work. But there's another group of users where it seems like the connection wasn't quite there. And so then I'll want to know, what did you ask them? What did you ask them? And it's not that you have to go talk to 20 people. A starting place is being very strategic about talking to 3 people. I actually just made this recommendation to someone this week who was doing tax service, and my recommendation to them is that they do it specifically for people with ADHD. And they gave me a list of questions of things that they wanted to ask these people in interviews. And I said, start with this one question. And they will probably answer the other questions, so you don't have to ask them all these other questions. But start with this one question. How do you feel about filing taxes?
Ah, ah. Rage.
Right. And then just let them talk. So if you had 3 people where you start with this general question,
Yeah.
a feeling about this, whatever, and
Rage.
just let them talk.
Why? Right? Like, yeah, if I'm talking about taxes, you're not going to get a whole lot of positivity out of me, which is going to complicate my ability to even, functionally process what I'm doing with my taxes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so this person is selling this service. They need to know, they need to connect with the feelings that people have, not about who you go to. And like it's helpful to know how you choose your tax preparer and all that. But what you're going to learn when you ask them about how they feel about the process is so much more than you could ever ask them. And so, like in your case, what I would do in doing this forensic audit, I think that's the word for forensic audit or something like that.
Yeah.
What I would do is go back and think about 3 people that you could have talked to. And of course, the actually putting on the event itself is testing. So the test, it was fruitful because the test of actually setting it up, planning it, carrying it out, that in itself is a test and it provides you valuable data. And if you want to go back, so now what your data are telling you is that these users' needs were not met in the same way that these users' needs were met. Why is that? Which one of these users did you talk to over here, the vendors, right? What kind of conversations did you have with them? And what kind of conversations did you have with the people you expected to attend? And just ask them a general question, like 3 people, and then those 3 people could also, result in other conversations you have with people. But I would ask 3 people that came to the event. Ask 3 people who came to the event why they came. Why did they think they were there? So very general, broad questions to start with.
So the event was to celebrate local Palestinian descendants while opening up the floor to whatever feelings were going to come out about
Mm-hmm.
conflict that's over there right now, the war that's happening there. Um, I was not part of the organizing. I said we because I'm good friends with the main organizer, and so I just sort of accidentally lumped myself in there. I wasn't part of it, but I loved this idea. I was
Hmm.
excited about this idea. Yes, let's collect. And as I'm listening to you and thinking about it, I think there was probably a disconnect from the purpose of the event, right? It's
Hmm.
having a women's health and wellness event, collecting. Oh, we might have frozen. Oh dear, you still there?
Okay, here we go. Here we go. That was on my, I think that was on my end. I'm back. Can
All
you hear
right,
me?
I can hear you. I'm not video
Okay.
back yet, but oh, there you are. Okay,
Okay.
we'll just do a little editing. That'll be fine.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think there was a disconnect. Had we been doing a women's health and wellness event, had we been doing an awareness event, something like that, where it makes more sense to bring a feminine hygiene product with you. Um, but the other thing I think that thing that you said about people often don't buy what they need, they buy what they want.
Hmm.
We live in a very complicated time right now in terms of what people are willing to invest in.
Hmm.
Um, I think certain events, certain apps on your phone, like there's a sense that certain things are supposed to be free. And if there's any kind of charging for it, like why would I go to a craft fair if I have to buy my way into it? Then I don't have any money to buy the crafts, right? Like I
So I have
think,
a question for you. I have a
yes.
question for you. How do you know that?
Well, one, I've heard that from people.
Okay.
I'm not going to go to that thing because there's an entry fee. The other thing I've heard is I don't have extra money right now. That's a lovely little idea to buy a can of soup or whatever, but I don't feel able to do that. So now I feel excluded.
So then my question is, did you hear that from the people that you intend to attract to this event? So that may be said among some people, but for the people you really needed to be at this event, are they saying it? And I'm asking you that because, again, it goes back to going to that ideal participant and talking to them to make sure that you're not getting noise in the data.
So I got to pull back from that event because I was not part of organizing it or following up or anything like that, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to answer your question based on the events that I run. I do
Okay.
amazing neurodivergent centered events,
Yes.
and very few people attend them. And it breaks my heart.
Mm. Hmm.
So like the last one that I did, and we were talking about it in process, the people I had asked to talk were just mind-blowingly amazing people. I had, someone who was in multiple halls of fame for social justice and women's rights, and right, like I could not imagine if you are part of anti-racism thinking, if you are part of indigenous rights thinking, if you are part of establishing community for neurodivergent people, if you were part of any little bit of what I included in those 2 days, you should be salivating
Yeah,
over
sure.
community.
Sure. Yeah.
And I had 30 people come.
Yeah. And I saw the roster.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I'm still rough over that. Like
sure.
there may be some explanation in this recent election.
I was about to say there's a forensic thing we could do,
There's a
but
forensic thing we could do.
yes, but
But I think
Not I,
I did not do what you're talking about doing enough. I did not go talk to people outside of my close circle, right? There would have been more people who would have come, but they had conflicts, right? So there could have
sure.
been a few more people who knew me were so excited about what I was doing. The people I asked to talk said yes because they loved the idea, right? The fact that Loretta J. Ross said yes to Don Marie Solis, like I don't even understand that. I don't need anything on a bucket list anymore. Check, right? Like
So
hero said
this
yes,
is unfortunate for you, but good in this conversation.
right?
Because you really you got my wheels turning, got me thinking about stuff. So and this isn't something, well, maybe down the road, like you and I have talked about things we want to work on. But I think having like design thinking communities where people are having these exchanges about their ideas, and there may be some out there already, but I don't know that I've encountered any that do this process intentionally. But maybe they are. But communities where you're getting input from other people as like as a place, as a home base, to use a baseball metaphor, as a home base where you can say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about, da da da, and have people like map out what that process is for you and help you map out that process, because it is really easy to start working in isolation, and everything projects that, everything that you project is this will work and for these reasons. But again, work for whom?
Yeah, and I think I would even need help figuring out how I even design for whom because I was so naive, right? Like I thought I had my for whom.
Yeah,
I
sure, of
thought
course.
I knew.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, maybe white lady problems, but I thought I knew, you know, like
Well, and I
this.
think you and we're both having like so for people who listen to this, and you mentioned white lady problems, I want people to think about those kinds of problems as skills development needs, because there we can frame that 100 different ways and talk about like the white supremacy delusion and all that, but also there's some like we're talking about skills development.
Right,
And part of skills development is having a different way to frame what is happening
right.
and a different way to approach what is happening. And also something else that caught my attention was you was like, I was so naive. And I've been right there. I have been right there thinking I had the right data. And again, I'm trying to make sure I don't sound like everything is linear and this happened and you're supposed to do this and you no, I have wasted a lot of time on things that sound great. I want to add something else in here too. I think this is true for me, and I think it's true for a lot of people who, and I do think you sound like a systems thinker, pattern reader person. I think there's something that happens with us too, and why design thinking is a really good framework for us. I think we're thinking about 6 months ahead on things. So we may not necessarily have all the resources we need that syncs up with the timing of the thing that we're trying to do. Because we'll do something big and then we have to stop and then go collect some more pieces and then it's like, oh, I get it now.
That's more
So
common
it's a
for the
spatial thing, but it's a timing thing.
yeah, the ADHD brain is often uh running shoulders first and you fall flat.
Yes,
Right? If you try to
yes.
run fast and your shoulders get ahead of your feet, you fall, right? And just like you said, sometimes our brain is so far out to the conclusion, we're
Right,
forgetting that, you can't start off at a sprint. You actually have to, you know, build
right.
to your full speed and all of that. So it's one of the things that I'm learning more and more about myself is insisting on patient, systematic approaches to things. Because yes, I am a system thinker. I am at the same time linear and multi-dimensional.
Yes,
So
yes.
I can be very good at the step by step. My brain's working so fast
Yeah,
that I'm tripping over myself to satisfy that dopamine seeking
sure,
ADHD get
sure.
to da. Like I have to fight really hard with myself to delay what feels like the beginning of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I may know I need to go talk to people.
Yes,
That feels to my brain like a delay, but we're not,
yes, I'm sure.
we
I'm
haven't done
sure it
the thing.
does.
Go do the thing, right? And like, no, doing the thing is, we are doing the thing. This is just step one of doing the thing.
And so I think adding to what you're saying, remember, so the design thinking is not a linear process. So if you've identified a problem and identified a set of users, you can prototype. You can prototype the thing, then go back to them and ask, okay, you can start from scratch, just asking them a broad open-ended question. You also have the opportunity to do user experience testing. So if you need to jump ahead and prototype it and see how it works for yourself, then this is like your design process doesn't have to follow those 5 steps to the letter and in that order. It may be that you have to get your hands on it first and then put it over here and then come back and ask like general questions as if you haven't done anything.
I agree with you. Absolutely. And I know as a multi-divergent brain, I don't want
Yeah, I know. I
it.
know. I know.
I don't want it. I have a shiny object
Yes.
and I don't want to put it on the shelf and wait and go back. And so, like, I think for me, part of what I would need is you taking me through not just looking at my goal mentally, but truly understanding I am going toward my goal,
Right.
even when I'm setting it over here and coming back and trying again. And that iterative process where you have a thing. And if people don't know what iteration or the iterative process is, think about any version of a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what iPhone we're on now. I'm an Android user, but we'll take the iPhone, right? Because it's always the iPhone, whatever, right? The number 12, the number 18, whatever we're on right now. Each one, two, three, four, however many we have, that's an iteration of the
Right.
iPhone. It's an iPhone, but it's a little tweak. It's a little tweak. It's a
Right.
little. So in this process, we're going to iterate. We're going to do a thing. We're going to try it. We're going to see what works, what doesn't work, and then we're going to tweak. And we're going to try it and we're going to see what works and what doesn't work, and we're going to tweak. And for the ADHD brain that is constantly seeking done, the idea that you might always be in that iterative process can feel very defeating.
Sure. So, and I think, okay, so a couple of things. Number one, this is why it's important to have good collaborators. Because if there are parts of this process that you don't want to do, not interested in doing, they can pick up the mantle. Number two, you're probably going to get bored with it. So at the point where you're bored with it, that's when they can pick it up and start doing the research around it. Like just acknowledge that that's what happens. And I think with the user testing, the thing is about setting it up so that there's novelty at every stage. And it feels like a different experience, like a different kind of study, a different way of doing things. But this is like the critical part here is having good partners that understand your ADHD and understand that you may be on to the next thing.
I
So
love that.
this is an opportunity to get out of their way and let them do their magic.
Yeah, I love that. I could talk to you about this forever.
I know. We can talk. So yeah, and I've had people I think that there has to be an understanding that there are certain needs that people have, depending on how their brains work, whether you put that over here with ADHD or autism, wherever you put it, that people work in different ways. And so there are three things that I ask people to think about is think about what your abilities are. So the things that you're born with, the capabilities, the things that you develop, but also your capacity as well. So when you think about design thinking and how you show up in that process, you think about your ability, your capabilities, and your capacity. And if you are capable, but don't have the capacity to revisit certain things, then that's where you've got to plug in other people who can extend your capabilities and your capacity so that you're not operating in a silo, you're not operating in isolation. Design really needs to be communal. Like it has to be, because that's where the real solutions come into play. It's a lot easier, especially like if you're just starting out, to just do things in isolation by yourself. But we have many interesting years ahead. And I think there's so many opportunities to think about small systems that we could create. Um, but if you're not building in something that allows you to go talk to people that you say you're building for, then you will find yourself in a position where it doesn't work for them because it's not for them. And so with design thinking, which is not a linear process, it is, flows in and out of defining the problem and empathizing with the user and ideating a solution or coming up with an ideal solution, prototyping, testing. It flows in and out of those different stages. But the most important thing about that is recognizing what people need. If these are the people we say we're trying to meet their needs, we have to be honest about who those people are.
I love that. And I want to make sure that we say that Dr. Douglass teaches this. You can find access to the coursework on neurowasomelife.com. Dr. Douglass and I have partnered to make sure that her education is available to the neurodivergent community as much as possible. And so please go check that out. We'll make sure links are in the description of this. Thank you so much. This was a blast. Gosh, I love talking to you.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And yes, I encourage people to go to work with me in this program. You can take these skills into any number of places. So if you think you want to go into undergraduate, go into graduate school, we can look at where you can apply these skills in your career, in your marriage, in your household. And you are a design thinker. We're formalizing this. We're saying these are very clear, explicit ways, the intentional ways that you're going to be a design thinker, but you're already doing this. You're already perceiving challenges and problems in your environment and empathizing with somebody's needs and putting solutions in place and prototyping and testing. You're already doing this. And so what we're talking about here is formalizing that and showing that you're not a passive participant in design thinking. You are an agent. You are active in this process. So let's formalize that and let's do it with intention.
Fantastic. Thank you so, so much. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you.